Hello! January is often referred to as the dumping ground for cinema, and it's simple. January tends to be the month of the year that most people are hard up for cash, and therefore there is less money to spend on luxuries like trips to the cinema. Film studios use this as a month to offload what on the surface may look like films they don't have much faith in at the box office, so dump them here to disappear as fast as they arrive. But it isn't quite that straightforward. In fact, there is money to be made in January. So let's take a look at the past few years and see what happened with cinema. I've gathered data from the years 2022 to 2025. I've listed down how many films were released in the month of January for each year. I've listed all of the films that could be considered a hit for the budget that it was made for, and I've also numbered the amount of films that came up with a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So let's see. 2022 saw the release of 16 films in January. Now this is pretty low, but consider that by the end of 2022 we were still reeling from the after effects of COVID-19, so there were less films made ready for release. Of this number, only 2 of the films have a fresh rating, those being Scream, released on January the 14th with a 76%, and The Fallout with a 91%. The Fallout we won't count in the money race though, as it was released on HBO Max. Scream was therefore the only hit for the month, taking in 138.9 million with a budget of only 24 million. We don't know if Spyglass hated the film or had no expectations for it. The previous film in the franchise was over a decade before, and it did not do well at the box office, so there could have been a bit of trepidation there, but regardless, the new film found a home with fans and critics. The sequel was fast-tracked and came out the following year with a more optimistic month of March, and the upcoming 7th film in the franchise is set for release next month, and looks likely to do similar business. I will have more to say on that franchise next month. 2023 saw the release of 21 films, 6 of them were critical hits, but only 3 of them made a profit at the box office, those being Megan, Plane and Missing. All were made on very low budgets, but Megan was the big winner with over 180 million whole. 2024 had 35 films released, 15 of them were fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, so this is a significantly better number, but only 4 of them were a hit at the box office. This time it was for Night Swim with over 50 million, The Beekeeper with over 160 million, the musical rehash of Mean Girls which took over 100 million, and the film Hundreds of Beavers, which only took 1.5 million but from a budget of apparently 150,000. So it's a hit. 2025 saw the release of 32 films in January. 13 of them were hit with critical praise, and 6 of them were hits at the box office, and they were One of Them Days with over 50 million, Flight Risk was a moderate hit with just over 48, Presence took 11 million on a budget of 2, Brave the Dark took 4.5 million on a budget of 200,000, Dogman was the big hit of the month with 145 million, a rare animated January release on a budget of 40 million and an approval rating of 82, and finally Companion, which took over 36 million on a budget of 10, which had an approval rating of 93. It is also worth noting that not all of these films released in these months mentioned were released theatrically. Streaming services also have their own schedules to fill, and between 2022 and 2025, in the month of January, at least 7 films from each of these years went straight to DVD or streaming. So who is taking advantage of the month of January, and who seems to be making out? Horror seems to do well. Producer Jason Blum has a rocky relationship with quality, but he also drives home box office numbers, as he's had hits with Megan and Night Swim. But he also had the miss with Wolfman in 2024, respectively. Action stars like Jason Statham and Gerard Butler also tend to show up in the early months. Statham had a hit with The Beekeeper, and next week he has the release of Shelter. And stay tuned next week for my coverage on the man himself. Gerard Butler, on the other hand, had Plane and Den of Thieves 2 in this period, and he currently has out Greenland 2. The quality for these guys could be anyone's guess, but they both can drive up some dollars as well for their efforts. These are all crude numbers though, because bear in mind that a lot of the box office that gets taken by these films that I've mentioned gets taken in the month of February and maybe even March, but clearly there is bank to be made for the right film that can afford some marketing. But let's not also forget that this is just the money made for new films released in January. It does not include the money made by films that were released previously to January that will still be playing in theatres. Those films themselves still have a hefty haul, and look at now, we are in January 2026 and the latest Avatar movie is still at number 1. So if this is a month that will shorten your chances of profit, why release at all? Why give a film the box office kiss of death? Well, simply put, they have to fill cinema schedules. These films would be hard pressed to find a slot later in the year, even if they had tried. But there is still the occasional film that had quality to it, it's just idiotic studios that were skeptical about the property. But for the right property, it could signify a big win, as we've seen by the numbers. So it's dumping ground for most, but hunting ground for the few. It is literally up to the individual to do their due diligence beforehand, if you want to avoid a stinker anyway. Are studios able to shake things up a bit to make January more appealing to people, or are they happy just to admit that this is the month where they send films to die that they could not care less about? Well, February is around the corner. Let's see what that looks like when it gets here.